I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. Whether moments from my childhood or moments now. It didn't help me that the people that I was raised by weren't healthy either, and I picked up their bad eating habits. I didn't know any better. I struggled with my weight a lot when I was younger. I always wore shirts into the pool because I hated how my body looked. I also think because my mother was overweight, I thought I was overweight as well. I wasn't really that fat looking back, but I just had terrible self issues ever since I was a little kid, and it's something that I still struggle with today. I have fortunately gotten over a lot of it, but the fact that it's still there is something that I can't seem to get over. It's something that I struggle with every time I look in the mirror, and it's something that I've struggled with in my most intimate moments with people, where it would still make me feel like I was unworthy of love in a way, just because I thought that if I hated my body so much, I couldn't believe that anyone else liked it. And I think also as a little kid, I struggled a lot with depression, which I didn't recognize as depression. I had a father that was fairly absent in my life, and I think I would cope with the pain of feeling like I was an outcast, feeling like people didn't want me to be in their life. I think I'd cope with that through eating, and yeah, I would just eat loads and loads of junk food just because it made me feel better. I eventually turned 12, puberty and all that, and my voice dropped very quickly for how old I was, which I think was hinting at the signs that I had a hormonal imbalance, which is the leading cause for gynecomastia, which is essentially developing female breasts as a male. By this time, when I was 12, I was still being picked on by the people that I thought I could call my friends. These people would bully me until I was beat down, at one point physically. They would always call me fat. I got the whole 9 yards. Fat ass, fat bitch. I used to pick out shirts that were thicker because otherwise my nipples would poke through and it would look like I had boobs. And, my own friends would flick them in front of people and people would call them out and laugh and point. I remember one time my friend flicked my man boobs up as a way to embarrass me, which made me cry one time, uh, which they then laughed at again and cracked jokes at because it was unmanly like to cry over something that seemed so unserious to them. And now I see some of these people and they look at me and they congratulate me and they tell me that they're proud of me, but I don't forget those things that they did to me and the ways that they made me feel. There was never a single one of them that would root for me ever, and I was basically just the group punching bag. Eventually, high school came around, and after my closest friends messed around with my ex girlfriend, I gained some self respect and I branched out to meeting new people. I basically knew it was time to change, so I got my first weightlifting class where I met people who I'm still friends with today, which was loads of fun. And this began my love for weightlifting. This showed me what it was like to get stronger, to get better, and just to feel good about yourself, which is something that I'd never experienced before. I eventually wandered into getting my second girlfriend. Um, my self image issues were still very prominent. Like I said, I felt like I was unworthy of love because of how I looked. And so I would withhold my eating because I felt as though I wasn't worthy of her love. Not that that was her fault at all. But I do remember her complimenting me on my body after I'd done nothing but starve myself and do excessive amounts of cardio. And even after the excessive amounts of cardio and lack of eating, I still looked like I had man boobs. And it made me want to go even further with the starvation, which I think eventually stunted my height growth. Time passed and we eventually split ways, and I was sick of feeling like she didn't like me, and my hateful attitude towards her for the perceived notion that she didn't like me, even though it was mostly all in my head. I took weightlifting a lot more seriously, and I would do it as a way to get back at her in a way, which did nothing besides make myself, love myself more, which, it eventually transformed into me weightlifting for myself and for self-improvement in general. I've since become a lot more comfortable with how I look since then. So comfortable where I eventually would post progress photos and then people would make fun of me for my gyno, which taught me that, don't post your shit on Reddit because they're a bunch of neckbeards or whatever. But even after this weightlifting, I've been lifting for about 2.5 years. There's still something that remains, and that's gyno. And, this fat behind my nipple is the reason why I flip-flopped between bulking and cutting so much, which has resulted in me making way less progress than I could have made had I committed to either one. Some days I'd wake up and I'd look in the mirror and I'd look super fat, and then some days I'd wake up and look like I'm small, with whatever I'm thinking that day influencing my diet for the next week. Obviously, it's something that I've lived with for years now, and I know that there is a way to get rid of gyno through surgery, but, it's also a part of me that I'd like to learn how to love. Gyno is something that I've rarely mentioned, in my videos. It's something that is rarely mentioned in the weightlifting community, besides people saying that it makes people's physiques worse. And it really is something that clearly affects somebody, and I don't think it's talked about enough, because it's not only is body dysmorphia is often talked about in the weightlifting community, but, you know, something like a serious case of gyno like I have, you never see any influencers with a slight amount of gyno. I mean, maybe very slightly if they have it, but nothing as bad as the gyno that I have. And that just, leads into you feeling even more isolated. It feels like you're running in place in a sense. You're working out consistently and your chest still looks smaller than your boobs that are on the end of your chest muscles, and, it sucks. Frankly, it sucks. I I'd like to learn to accept it, and I've been struggling with that, learning to accept, my gyno, because it is something I'd like to learn to love, because it's a part of me, and I feel like it would almost be unnatural in a way to not. I think it would be almost unnatural in a way to get it removed. But, you know, until then, I'm just going to keep lifting and keeping my diet on check and all that stuff. But